Hey, can everyone see that in presentation mode?
Yep, good to go.
Yes, looks great.
All right, great. Well, I've got 1 o'clock, so let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to this month's monthly climate perspective on drought and hydrological conditions. I can't believe it's October, but it's already October. And uh, as normal, this webinar series is presented by the Kentucky Climate Center at Western Kentucky University, in partnership with the National Integrated Drought Information System, NIDIS, and in coordination with the Midwest Drought Early Warning System. Production and delivery of this webinar reflects the contributions of many partners committed to serving the needs of the Commonwealth of Kentucky and its people. Our next regularly scheduled webinar will be November 6th at the same time, 1 p.m. Central, 2 p.m. Eastern. And this webinar is being recorded and will be available for viewing. It's broadcast on the live stream on the Kentucky Climate Center YouTube channel. And all webinars are archived on the YouTube channel as well. So if you'd like to review any previous months, they are there in the archive. Well, this is just a kind of a typical image from this month. A lot of mornings had this low-level fog. This is our Drake County Mesneth station uh, about a couple of weeks ago. And this is pretty typical of a lot of the mornings that we saw on the Mesnet's cameras. So as normal, we'll look at some recent conditions and impacts, and then we'll look ahead at short and long-term outlooks, and then a Q&A at the end. Uh, on the left here, just a couple of more photos, just happen to be the same day. The top, the left there is from Monroe County, a little rainbow there off in the distance. Not a lot of rain in the month. There are not a lot of rainy days, I should say, but that's September 25th was one of the stormier days we had. And that's a deer stand in the middle of that photo, if you can see that. And then a nice, oh, let's see, then a sunrise at our Clark County station. All right, we're jumping in here. The temperatures, if you had guessed it was a warm month, it was. We averaged 70.3 degrees, which is about a degree and a half above normal. But it's most Septembers can either be hot or cold. So even though we were a degree and a half above normal, that only tied us as the 42nd warmest September on record. So um, Septembers can be pretty high, pretty warm, or pretty chilly actually. So even with a degree and a half, we were right there in the middle, the top third, tying 1915 for that 42nd warmest. And if you look at the daily highs and lows, it was actually the daily highs that were quite a bit above average. Most of the state was 2 degrees or more above average for the daily highs, even above 3 degrees there along southwestern corner, northern tip of the state. But our nighttime lows were right around average or even slightly below average. So a lot of clear days, a lot of clear nights there for a while. And if we look at the year to date, just for kicks, we're less than a degree above normal. We're zero point 0.8 degrees above normal, which ties us as the 27th warmest year on record so far. Um, Looking at how that varies spatially, most of the state is less than a degree. But if you get down to the southwestern corners, parts of the western Kentucky, it's slightly over a degree. Our nighttime, our nighttime lows a little warm across parts of the western Kentucky, southern Kentucky for daytime highs, but all together uh, not terribly noticeable, although we did have a fairly warm summer. Jumping to precip, this is the last 7 days as of the last 7 days of the month of September. And you see some nice amounts there, kind of a swath across the middle of 2 to 3 inches. And unfortunately, a lot of the areas that needed the rain the most. You see, if you look closely in there, you'll see a couple of 2.25, 2.93, even a 3.04 up in the northeastern corner, which we needed. Lewis County and up that way. So I desperately needed there, and they got it. If we look back at the last 2 weeks of the month, again, you kind of see that nice swath covering much of the state that did need the most rainfall, and that was very welcome. If we go by 60 days, you don't really notice a whole lot of change from the 30-day map. If you look at the numbers, the legend changes a little bit, so the colors change. But if you look at the raw amounts, they didn't really change much, and that's because August was particularly dry. And then if we go back 90 days, again, not much change in the numbers there. And again, it just kind of reflects the dry late summer that we had and how much we needed the rainfall that we've seen here in September. Now, if we go forward, looking at this month, there was most of the state got around 4 inches. The central, the eastern portions got over 4 inches. Parts of western and northern Kentucky got a little less than 4 inches, but altogether, most of the state got average or above average rainfall, again, which was sorely needed. Some parts of the western and northern parts of the state got slightly less than 100% of their annual or monthly total, but overall, a nice wet month for much of the state. Now, if we look at the year to date, again, you see that kind of big swath right through central Kentucky, western and central Kentucky, of over 50 inches. And again, that's typical of our annual total. So you've already got a big swath of the state that reached their annual total. And if you look at the percent of mean, again, you've got that swath where we've gotten over 125% of our January to September totals. And in fact, they've already reached their annual totals at this point. And the entire state's generally seen at least 100% of the year-to-date rainfall. And this will go to a long ways explaining why our hydrological numbers are looking good right now as far as stream flows and that. If we look at seasonal, January through March, again, we had that February flooding, and you see that reflected in a big part of the state had over 125% during that 3-month period. If you go look at April through June, again, we had that April flooding, and so you see even a swath there over 175% of normal. So the first 6 months, rather wet, and then we look at July through September, and that's when things really dried out, and you see most of the state getting below 100% for the last 3 months. Luckily, again, September coming in a little wetter than normal, so that's helped some. But you still see a big part of the state there with the yellow of 75% or less for that 3-month period. So Kentucky for September averaged 4.23 inches of rainfall, which is over a half inch above normal, and that was 118% of average. So that ranks September is tied with 2021 as the 34th wettest September on record. So roughly top 25% of months, which we needed. And that puts us at roughly a year-to-date total of 47.69 inches statewide, which puts us at 8.8 inches above the mean, which puts us around 8th wettest year on record so far. We were first through the first 5 months of the year, but of course we've dropped since then. We're several inches above 9th place, so it looks like we'll be safe in the top 8 for a while, unless we continue to dry out. But right now we're 8th wettest on record. Now, just some interesting totals. These are year-to-date totals from the Mesonet stations, and we've got, if I counted right, 8 stations above 55 inches for the year so far, kind of in the blue color there in the center. And with the top station now at Hart County at 58.9 inches, which again, all these numbers are above a typical annual total. So even if it stopped raining at those sites now, that they would look like they had healthy rainfalls for the year. But looking over the map, you see quite a few stations over 50, and even the lowest stations are above average. The average this time of year is around 38 inches, and except for some, except for the very easternmost station there, 35.67. I think all other sites are above the typical average for this time of year by far. All right, switching gears a little bit, we did have some severe weather during the month. This was a nice photo we captured our Zion site in Todd County, and nice striations there in the clouds and severe storm that hit there. We had 3 or 4 days, good days of storms across the state, and uh, nothing too potent, but some pretty strong storms nonetheless. We had I think if I counted right, 113 storm events recorded. Most of those were trees falling or some minor wind damage. You see all the little trees there, predominantly over southern and eastern Kentucky. There were a few pretty heavy rain events scattered about, and then one EF0 tornado on September 22nd. Most of these events occurred on about 3 or 4 days. September 5th and then September 22nd was a lot of these wind events and the tornado, and the 25th saw some pretty strong storms. I think September 4th had a few things. There were a couple of minor hail events, but quite a few warnings that were issued with these, as you can imagine, with all that wind damage. But overall, not too intense. Although for September, it was, I would say, above average for your typical September. Now, how are we doing as far as in comparison with other years? We're actually running fourth right now. If you among all the years going back to 1986. Now this is thunderstorms and tornadoes. We're just we've had this is statewide. We've had 953 Weather Service warnings to date. Right behind 2006 with 968. So we're just 15 warnings behind number three here. So we might move into that top three yet before the year's out. But we're getting to the period where hopefully we don't really see any more severe weather for the remainder of the year. With only 2011 and 2012 ahead of us. Now, if we break that down, we are third in the number of tornadoes, just behind 2011, 2012, and but we are fourth in if you look at just severe thunderstorm warnings. But still a pretty rarefied company. There's you see how many more we've had this year than most of the previous years in the last 25, well, 30 plus years, 40 years. All right. Looking at our drought situation, this is the current drought. Quite a bit of color on the national map. You look at the Intermountain West and quite a bit of extreme drought along the highest peaks there, and pretty large area of severe drought in the Intermountain West. The plains are pretty wet, especially compared to normal for them, but then you get close to the Mississippi River Valley and parts east, and wow, that's quite a bit of moderate to severe drought for the eastern U.S., especially as you get into areas like the Northeast, which, to see extreme drought in New England is fairly rare. And there you see some in West Virginia again and Ohio, just like reminiscent of last fall. So even parts of the Deep South, you see a little bit in Alabama and various areas. So pretty dry overall, and yeah. So And then if we look at Kentucky, this is an improvement over last week, but still quite a bit of dryness out there. If we look at 3 months ago, July 1st, no drought, no abnormally dry areas at all. So, we had a pretty rapid deterioration through the summer. And last week we had over half the state, 65%, almost two-thirds of the state was in some form of drought, with nearly 85% in at least abnormally dry. And while the overall number is just dropped a little bit to 84%, you see a pretty significant drop there in the area officially in drought. Just over a quarter, 27, 26% is in drought this week. Will we see improvement next week? Well, the rain in the forecast will probably come after we issue the next update to this. So we'll see. We'll see what we do with this next week. But there is some good news in the forecast. And but again, looking at this week, you see the D2 to D4 drop from 22% to just over 5%. So again, there was quite a bit of improvement due to those rains that we had back last month. And this is the monthly class change. Again, most of this occurring in the last week or two, and but you do see most of the state improving from where we were 4 weeks ago. Um, but you look at the national map, and yeah, there was some improvement in the Intermountain West. But as far as the eastern U.S., there wasn't much improvement at all, except over Kentucky and parts of Tennessee. So we were fortunate that we were able to get that rain that we did. Now, looking at some measures of soil moisture from satellite, it shows that we're doing okay, at least in the topsoil. We'll talk about that in a minute when we look at the Mesonet to see if that holds up. But if we look at the stream flows, they're doing well. They did well before we had the rain, and they're continuing to do okay, especially for this time of year. So that is good news. Uh, Yeah, very little that's abnormally dry. You see a couple of orange dots there in the 28-day average, but in the last 7 days, everything is normal. Now, looking at the Mesonet, this is where things get a little more, um, I don't want to say depressing, but it reflects that we're not quite out of the woods yet just after a single rain. And especially out west, you see, and we'll start in Graves County. The orange line is the 40-inch depth. The reddish line there is 20 inches. And you see that with the lower depths, we're as dry as we've been nearly all year. You see a little improvement there at 20 inches, but not a lot of improvement. And so those, you get down below to 20 and 40 inches, at least out west, areas out west, they're still pretty dry. And you see the upper layers, yeah, they moistened quite a bit from where they were, so that's good news. But if we get too many more clear, warm days like we've had, I suspect that'll continue to drop pretty quickly. Now, if we look at Henderson, again, that 40-inch depth is still the driest it's been, and as is that 20-inch depth. And here you see, yeah, they did improve at the upper layers pretty quickly from that rainfall, but they're drawing pretty quickly too, and they're not a whole lot above their lowest levels seen back in September. So, yeah, they are wetter than they were, which is good news, but that could drop pretty quickly. Moving east, you do see quite a bit of improvement and a lot better conditions than what we find in the west. Um, Quite a bit of improvement even at now this doesn't have the lowest levels, but I think this top line may be 20 inches, and but overall quite a bit better uh, from where they were. And then Owsley County, um, fairly wet, and better than they were roughly a month ago. All right. So how has this impacted agriculture? This is a nice picture we caught from Cumberland County. You see a nice cornfield there, a nice rainbow off in the distance. And again, this was one of those stormy days, so we had some nice clouds around. Most days weren't cloudy. We had a lot of clear days. But so this corn looks good, at least from this picture. So what do the statistics tell us? Well, Matt can fill in the details when we're done here, but boy, it looks like by all measures, 2025 just wasn't a very good year. So we started off okay, but boy, you see the drawdown during August and September really took its toll on the corn, and you see a little improvement there with that late September rain, but not a lot of improvement, but there was a slight uptick. Um, and so this is corn conditions. Um, a percent rated poor, very poor, or fair is pretty high, about 50% um, for corn. If we look at pastures, that's where it really took a hit. You've got, compared to previous years, only about, it looks like about 40% of the pastures are rated very poor or poor. Um, and especially in light of other years, we're doing pretty poor. Um, and then soybeans, about 30%, whoops, 30%, 33% rated poor, very poor, only about a third rated good or excellent. So, especially compared to recent previous years, we're doing quite poorly. And soybeans took the biggest hit, I think, from that dry spell we've had the last few months. And winter wheat finished up back in the summer. All right. Well, the good news is there is rain in the forecast. And this is the latest 7-day QPF. And they're showing, over an inch to inch and a half and pretty much statewide, except for the Jackson Purchase area. It looks like pretty healthy rain totals. So hopefully we can keep that in the forecast, maybe raise that a little bit. And so that's good news. So we do have some rain projected for us. Um, so that should help. Now, if we look at the 6 to 10 day outlook, again, we see it looks like the driest areas have been pushed to the deeper south. You see that rain coming in, those rain chances coming in, at least northern half of the state, with continued warm temperatures, but I think temperatures will drop after this next rain system comes through. Now, we're still predicted to be above average for much of October, but again, you do see those rain chances continuing through days 8 through 14. And that's good news. Now, if we look at the month forecast, continued above normal temperatures, but they do have us as below normal for the month. But even with that, we do see some rain in the forecast, so it's not going to be like last year where we almost had the driest month on record ever with 0 rainfall. We ended up with 0.2 average inches for the month last year, which was the second driest month I think ever. But we do have some rain in the forecast, so it shouldn't be. It may still be a below average month, but hopefully not too much below. Now, if we look at the remainder of the year, October through December, continued warm, but again, it looks like the driest areas have been pushed further south and to the west. And so they're giving us equal chances for above or below normal precip for the remainder of the year. And overall, that's pretty good news for us. And really what you're seeing is more of a typical La Nina pattern. You see, these are the seasonal outlooks. This is upper left is our winter forecast, next spring, upper right, and then next summer, and then this time next year, next fall. So this winter, again, a typical La Nina, we have equal chances of above or below normal temperatures. I suspect we'll see some shots of cold air come down with kind of a La Nina setup. And But then as we get further into next year, we become warmer nationwide, but that's just based on long-term trends. So you can put virtually no, very little confidence in that forecast. Now, again, this winter's forecast for precip, it shows this nice bullseye above across Kentucky for above normal rainfall chances. And again, this is your very typical La Nina pattern, and that's what we're seeing in what they're predicting. But after that, we go into more neutral conditions. And so you see nationwide, there's not a whole lot predictability here. They do have us in above normal precip for next summer, but that's probably some output from the dynamical models. But overall, it's we're moving to a neutral phase next summer, and it's a lot less predictable, and you're seeing that in their forecast. And here's that INSO outlook, a weak La Nina for this winter. And then we quickly transition to a neutral phase even during the course of the winter. And I suspect next spring we'll be into a neutral phase. And the models, the dynamical models show it, we're maybe transitioning this time next year to a El Nino, maybe, or at least a neutral phase for a while. So we'll see. We'll see. But the short term is we are in a La Nina, although it's a weak La Nina, and that will set us up for hopefully some nice winter time precip. Now they are predicting our drought to continue, or at least dry conditions. They say drought persists here, but hopefully we'll stay out of official drought and moisten up a little bit. And the seasonal outlook is more basically an expansion of the dry conditions across the mid and deep south and then across much of the Midwest. Now, how does that impact fire potential? Pretty low fire potential in our outlook. Nothing in Kentucky, just parts of Appalachia as we go forward. But fortunately, nothing for us in the fire outlook. So, in summary, last month was the 42nd warmest, and largely due to our daytime highs. And we were the 34th wettest. So we were over a half inch above normal for the month. And so that was good news. Year to date, we're falling to 8th wettest year on record, with a state average around 8.8 inches above normal. And so a pretty wet year still. And so far, we've had at least 8 measurement stations exceed that 55-inch mark. And so far this year, it's been the 27th warmest. So we're right around 0.8 degrees above average. And after a dry summer, we did receive some relief. We didn't even get a hurricane, but we got some much needed rain anyway. And if we can get a tropical system up here, well, that would help even more. Now, the bad news, of course, is the agricultural, the fall harvest. The rain was a little too late to help with a lot of that. But the good news, while even October is forecast to be dry, we are seeing some nice amounts in the 7-day forecast, 7-day QPF. And as we go forward into winter, it looks like with the La Nina pattern that we have setting up that we should see above normal rainfall for the winter to help replenish some of what we didn't get the last few months. And after that, a neutral pattern, so all bets are off after this winter. So we'll see what happens then. But with that, again, whoops, I didn't update this, but our next regularly scheduled webinar is November 6th and at the same time. And if you do have any feedback, feel free to reach out to me or Matt Dixon at University of Kentucky or Chip Zimmer at the Kentucky Division of Water. And with that, thank you for your participation. Thank you for joining us each month. And I'll stop and take any questions. Yeah, Chip, in case you hadn't seen it, Chip commented the 2012 reached the top basically with just 2 days of severe weather and tornadoes. Yeah, looking back at those years in 2011, 2012, and 2012 that are ahead of us, yeah, those, it doesn't take too many days, of these severe weather outbreaks to really move you up for the year. That's kind of typical for Kentucky, I think. Matt, I see you're on here. Any comments about the ag and how things are shaping up, or how
Yeah,
bad it was?
you mentioned on the webinar, rain was too late for some of those crops planted later in the year. Your double crop beans and whatnot. Rain was nice to see, but it's all about timely rainfall in agriculture. If you don't get it at the right time, it can really hurt your crop, really hurt those ultimate yields. But it's just overall been a really tough year for farmers. I know I got a podcast I'm going to be on next Tuesday. I know this will be a large topic of the conversation, but you start off the year with extremely wet conditions. A lot of guys were late getting into the field, didn't plant into ideal soil conditions. You go through June, July, rain keeps falling, but then you get in the latter half of July, going into August, and the faucet essentially just turns off. And all this is happening. I've been talking to some ag econ guys. It's all happening a year where grain prices are just terrible. And I was just talking to one of our specialists up in the ag econ department, and he said a lot of these row crop guys are going to be lucky to even break even this year after they pay all their input costs. He also mentioned this ag business program. I'm not real familiar with it, but he said this might be the first year where they actually see the average farm income in the red. So
Mm.
it's not great. 2026, as he mentioned, maybe doesn't look the greatest either, but a lot can happen between now and then. We need an increased export demand from the USC's other countries moving forward, but just not seeing it right now. But
Mm.
that's what I got. It's if you're diversified, maybe you got some money in cattle and whatnot, not as much of a hit, but just looking strictly at these row crops, it's not been a great year in 2025 whenever you're looking at prices. So yeah.
Where you look at those plain states and they had kind of ideal conditions for this year, and so they didn't have the drought and they didn't have the floods
Yeah,
and
yeah. And of course, we're looking at like South America types of crops coming out of there. We're looking over to Asia and whatnot. Of course, tariffs are going to have an impact too. So it's just kind of been all over the board and just not ideal here in 2025. Hopefully, the script flips in 2026. We'll see where it goes. But yeah, it just hasn't been great here recently.
yeah, yeah. Any other comments or questions? Yeah, it was an odd month, but I was a little surprised looking at the data that it was an above average rainfall month. But then we don't average, but 3+ inches. So it's you don't need a whole lot to get there, statistically. But we had a lot of sunny, warm days in there too.
We'll see how these outlooks pan out. I mean, um, hopefully we hit on this rain over the next week. Keeps coming down, but we still got a long ways to go before we get to the winter season. So we'll see how it all pans out.
Yeah, there's a lot of dryness in that those national maps. That was uh we'll see if we can get a pattern change for sure. Any other thoughts, questions, comments? All right. All right. Well, thank you again for joining us. And we hope to see you back here this time next month. Yep. Thank you all. Goodbye.